Good afternoon. We have just concluded the first day of the meeting of NATO Defence Ministers. We had a positive and stimulating discussion. This is our first ministerial meeting with the new Biden administration and an important milestone in our preparations for our summit later this year. We have a unique opportunity to open a new chapter in relations between Europe and North America. We face global challenges that no country and no continent can tackle alone. That is why I launched the NATO 2030 initiative, to make our transatlantic alliance fit for the future. I have put forward a number of ambitious proposals to prepare for our summit. They cover key areas: strengthening our commitment to deterrence and defense, by providing incentives to allies to contribute more capabilities and ensure fairer burden sharing. We also need to raise our level of ambition when it comes to resilience, which is our first line of defense. And we must do more to promote transatlantic cooperation on defense innovation, so that NATO keeps its technological edge. My proposals also include improving our ability to train and build capacity in NATO partner countries, because this is a more sustainable way to contribute to stability in our neighborhood and to fight terrorism. Political coordination among allies is another important area for NATO 2030. To use NATO more as a platform for consultation and coordination on more issues and in more formats. At the same time, we need to enhance our political and practical cooperation with like-minded democracies around the world, so we can protect the rules-based order, which is undermined by countries that do not share our values, like Russia and China. NATO must also do more to address the security implications of climate change. This affects all of us, and our alliance must play its role by reducing vulnerabilities and emissions from the military sector. Finally, this is a time to update NATO's strategic concept so that we address existing and emerging challenges, recommit to our values, and reinforce the bond between Europe and North America. Today, we had a great start to our discussion to build a substantial and forward-looking agenda for the NATO summit, to secure a more peaceful and prosperous future through a strong transatlantic alliance. Adapting to the future requires sustained investment in our defense. Today, we discussed progress toward fairer burden sharing. 2021 will be the 7th consecutive year of increased defense spending by European allies and Canada. 9 allies are expected to spend 2% of GDP on defense, compared to only 3 in 2014. Since 2014, European allies and Canada have contributed a cumulative extra of $190 billion. And this year, 24 allies will meet the guideline of investing at least 20% of their defense budgets into major new equipment. So we are making real progress. But we must all keep the commitments we have made and continue to invest in our defense and increase the readiness of our forces. This is the only way to keep our nation safe in a more unpredictable world. We concluded with a session with our partners Finland and Sweden and the European Union High Representative Borrell. It was an opportunity to share views on the common challenges we face, to discuss transatlantic relations at this important juncture, and the need for Europe and North America to work closely together. With that, I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, and we can start with Gül Sonomut from NTV.
I have 2 questions. My first question is with regard to NATO 2030 as well as the strategic concept. when will you put into force the 2030 action plan, particularly based in mind with the Wise Man report and the shortfalls of the strategic concept today? What are the topics that are really urgent for the strategic concept to be updated? What are the shortfalls for that? And of course, the timeline. And on the other hand, although the discussion will be tomorrow, Iraq, I was wondering whether you had a comment with regard the attack on the Erbil airport where United States officers have been killed, as well as the Gara operation where 13 Turkish civilians have been killed. Thank you.
First on NATO 2030 and the strategic concept. I propose for heads of state and government, when they meet later on this year, that they should agree to update the NATO strategic concept. I do so because I think the time is right. We have a strategic concept we agreed back in 2010, and that concept has actually served us well. But since then, the security environment we face has fundamentally changed. For instance, in the current strategic concept, we are not addressing the shifting balance of power and the security consequences of the rise of China. We hardly mention climate change. I think climate change is a serious crisis multiplier, and it really affects our security. We need to address that in a new strategic concept. And also, back in 2010, we were working for establishing what we then referred to as a strategic partnership with Russia. Since then, we have seen Russia being responsible for aggressive actions against the neighbors, the illegal annexation of Crimea, and things have fundamentally changed. So we need to update our strategic concept. We need to recommit to our core values, and we need to use the strategic concept to further strengthen the bond between North America and Europe. This is an idea which is broadly supported by NATO allies, and I hope that NATO leaders, heads of state and government, when they meet later on this year, will then agree to start the process to task me to work on a revised and updated strategic concept for the alliance. Then, regarding the attacks in Iraq, I condemn the rocket attack in Erbil and the tragic loss of life. I want to express my condolences to those who have lost their loved one, and my best wishes for a full and speedy recovery go to the injured. The Iraqi people should not have to live in fear of violence, and I welcome that a number of allies will support the investigation into this attack. I would also like to express my condolences to Turkey for the killing of Turkish citizens in northern Iraq, and I condemn in the strongest possible terms those responsible. And allies expressed their condolences during today's meeting of defense ministers. Allies stand in solidarity with the people of Turkey.
For the next question, we'll go to Brooke Stigner from Jane's Defense.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Hi. Hi, Secretary General. I have two unrelated questions. One, regarding your call on Monday for common funding for deterrence and defense. Did the Allies discuss this idea today to help cover deterrence deployments or other costs? And if that was accepted, would it undermine NATO's costs lie where they fall principle? Second question, different topic. Your call for a new transatlantic effort to develop new disruptive technologies. That's a very good idea. However, many Secretary Generals before you have proposed similar things: smart defense, the Connected Forces Initiative, pooling and sharing. These have not led to very much. And they've also tried to reach out to innovative and small companies for the last 5 to 10 years. Again, not much. What would you propose to produce more results in that sense? Thank you.
So first on the NATO 2030 and my proposals on funding, I think we first have to realize that I have put forward many proposals covering a wide range of different areas, from deterrence and defense, resilience, innovation, but also the security implications of climate change and the rise of China, and other proposals, which I think is important when we now prepare for the upcoming summit, and when we also now have a unique opportunity to strengthen and to make sure that the transatlantic bond remains the bedrock for our security. We have the upcoming summit, we have the NATO 2030, we have a new US administration, and all of that together really provides a unique opportunity after some difficult years for all of us on both sides of the Atlantic to have a substantive, forward-looking agenda, NATO 2030, as we prepare for the upcoming summit. One of the proposals is to strengthen deterrence and defense by making sure that we incentivize allies to provide more capabilities for deterrence and defense activities or in NATO territory. Because today, when we have, for instance, deterrence and defense activities like the battle groups in the Baltic region, or the enhanced or the forward presence in the Black Sea region, air policing, maritime operations, standing naval forces, all these capabilities are provided by allies, and those allies that provide those capabilities also cover all the cost. My proposal is that NATO should cover some of those costs, because that will demonstrate stronger commitment to our collective defense, to Article 5, to deterrence and defense. It will incentivize allies to provide more capabilities for air policing, battle groups, standing naval forces, and it will mean fairer burden sharing. So I think this is a better way to spend more money, and it's a way to invest together. Let me also highlight one other point, that this is, as we have already agreed to spend more, and allies already do that. All allies have increased defense spending, and more allies meet the 2% guideline. This is something else. This is about how we spend the money. That we should spend more of our total funding for defense together, because it will strengthen deterrence and defense. It will provide more capabilities for battle groups, air policing, and also lead to a fairer sharing of the burden. Yeah, then, oh sorry, technology. I forgot that one. Technology, so new disruptive technologies as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, autonomous systems, facial recognition, all of that will reshape the nature of warfare fundamentally. We need to make sure that we keep the technological edge, which has served NATO so well for so many years. And we should do that in different ways, but let me just point out three. One, we need to invest. And the good news is that since 2014, and that is new, allies have stopped cutting defense budgets, they have started to increase. And not only increase defense spending, but 20% of that is allocated into investments in new capabilities, meaning also new technology. So when we invest in new planes or new drones or new whatever, we also invest in new technology, making it possible to maintain the technological edge. The second thing we should do is to make sure that when allies develop new capabilities with advanced new disruptive technologies, we need to make sure that these capabilities coming from different allied countries can operate together. Interoperability, NATO standards has always been important, but if anything, it's even more important now with even more advanced technologies embedded in our military capabilities. And thirdly, NATO is a platform for allies to address some very serious and difficult ethical questions which are raised by the use of these technologies in military capabilities. There is no easy answer to that, but to try to start a process where we address how we can develop some minimum ethical guidelines on the use of these technologies in weapon systems, NATO provides a perfect platform for doing that, and that's part of my NATO 2030 proposal and my NATO 2030 agenda.
We'll now go to Jane Ferguson from PBS NewsHour. Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you so much. Just briefly, what is the intention with regards to the May 1st deadline for withdrawal from the United States? What does NATO intend to do, whether or not you tend to honor that deal? And moving on from that, what role do you envision NATO playing moving forward in Afghanistan?
You're right that in the deal that was signed last year, I was actually in Kabul when the deal was signed in Doha, and in that deal, there is a May 1st deadline. But the promise to leave Afghanistan is conditions-based. Our presence in Afghanistan is conditions-based. And Taliban has to meet their commitments. And what NATO does now is that we, first of all, do whatever we can to support the peace process and the full implementation of the deal. We will only leave when the time is right, and the focus now is how can we support the peace efforts, the peace talks, and re-energize, relaunch new strength and new momentum in the peace talks, because that's the only path to peace. As you know, we went into Afghanistan together, NATO allies, partners, and the United States after 9/11. We have made decisions on adjusting our presence together, and we will also make the decision when the time is right to leave together. So what we do now is to coordinate, consult. We are going to have a discussion tomorrow. I'll not preempt the outcome of that discussion, but allies are coordinating closely, all allies, including, of course, the United States, and then we will make a decision together. I think the main issue is that Taliban has to reduce violence, Taliban has to negotiate in good faith, and Taliban has to break all ties, has to stop supporting international terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda.
We'll now take a question from Kevin Barron from Defence One.
Hello, Secretary General. Well, similar question my question is on the timing of the decisions. Can NATO make a decision on its Afghanistan presence before the United States makes its decision, given the administration, the Biden administration says they're undergoing an Afghanistan study review that's not going to be ready by tomorrow?
We will make a decision together, and that was clearly also stated by allies. That has been stated by many allies already, and it has also been clearly stated by Secretary Austin. And I welcome the strong commitment and clear message from the United States that they will coordinate closely with NATO allies and partners. We are 30 NATO allies, but there are also partners like Finland, Sweden, and others who are part of our NATO mission in Afghanistan. NATO allies welcome that message from the United States, not least because there is a significant non-US presence in Afghanistan. There are roughly 10,000 NATO troops in Afghanistan now, and the majority of them are not from the United States. And I think that demonstrates the value of NATO, also for the United States. Because the United States, when they went into Afghanistan, they didn't go alone. They have been supported by NATO allies with tens of thousands of troops for now close to 2 decades. So, of course, the United States is the biggest force contributor to our mission in Afghanistan, but not the only one. Many allies, many partners, and therefore this is a decision we only can make together. We are assessing together, we are analyzing together, we are supporting the peace process together, we are calling on Taliban to reduce violence, to negotiate in good faith, and to stop supporting international terrorists like Al-Qaeda, and then we will make the necessary decisions together. But I think the main focus now should be on re-energizing the peace talks, because that's the only way to a peaceful solution.
We have now a question from PJ McCleary from Breaking Defense.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the discussions you've had so far about Turkey and the purchase of the S-400 from Russia, and if there'll be any consequences for Turkey other than being removed from the F-35 program.
Also, the issue of the S-400 was not discussed in this meeting today. It has been discussed among NATO allies before. I have also expressed my concerns about the consequence of the Turkish decision to acquire the Russian S-400 air and missile defense system. And I also pointed at the possibility and the opportunity that lies in working with NATO allies, providing alternative systems, like, for instance, the Patriot system or the European SAM-T, which is produced by Italy and France. So this is an issue I have discussed several times, and NATO allies have discussed several times. And yes, there are disagreements, differences, but at the same time, I think NATO provides a platform also to discuss difficult issues where we disagree, as the issue of S-400.
For the next question, we'll go to Al Arabiya and Nourdin Fridi.
Good afternoon, Secretary General. Vous m'entendez?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have a very short question. After the Erbil attack 1 or 2 days before, this kind of operation has any impact on the NATO training mission, which you are about to expand, sir? Thank you very much.
If anything, it makes the NATO training mission even more important, because we will tomorrow address and discuss expanding the NATO training mission in Iraq. NATO allies provide support and training for Iraqi security forces in different frameworks already. NATO is part of the US led coalition to defeat Daesh. NATO also has its own training mission in Iraq, and the plan is, and I expect ministers tomorrow to agree to expand the training mission so we can provide more training, more capacity building all across the country. I spoke with the Iraqi Prime Minister yesterday, Prime Minister Kadhimi, and he expressed once again the strong support and wish from the Iraqi government to have an expanded, increased NATO presence there. We do this to support the Iraqi people, but we do it also because it is in our interest to fight terrorism. And we strongly believe that in the long run, the best weapon we have against terrorism is to train local forces and build local capacity. And we have seen the courage, the commitment of the Iraqi forces defeating Daesh or liberating the country, the territory that Daesh controlled. And that courage, that commitment has been important for the people of Iraq in fighting Daesh, but it's also important for NATO allies because Daesh is a threat not only to the people of Iraq or the people of Syria, but also to people in our allied countries. So if anything, violence, instability in Iraq is the reason why we are there, to help the Iraqi government, the Iraqi security forces, to stabilize their own country.
We'll now take the next question from Nicolas Groverheid from Bruxelles 2. Please go ahead.
Hello, bonjour. Hello, Secretary General. I have one question of the burden sharing on the Department of Defense. I have seen that now you are referring for the year 14, and some months ago, I remember you have more reference of the year 16. Is it because Donald Trump was leaving and now the government in the United States, and you have remember that this engagement, it is with Obama on the summit as Pays de Galles. And also I want to have some comment of maybe if you fear that the COVID-19, the coronavirus crisis, could destroy some effort of defense state. And just one question, if I may, on the Turkey, how do you feeling the ambience with the summit with Turkey now in the NAC, in the NATO Atlantic Council, because sometimes it is not so good in the past. Thank you very much.
First on burden sharing, we agreed in 2014 what we call the Defence Investment Pledge, where all allies agreed that after years of reducing defence spending, we should start to increase defence spending. And the good news is that every year since 2014, all allies have increased defence spending, and all allies are now spending more. And more allies meet the 2% target, and the majority of NATO allies have plans in place to be at 2% or above by 2024, which was the date we set. So it is, and it's also correct that sometimes I refer to the increase since 2016 because this was an important issue also for the previous president. But I know that burden sharing increased defense investments is also important for President Biden, because President Biden was actually vice president when President Obama and Vice President Biden, they were at the summit in Wales in 2014 and pushed very hard for that decision. So different US administrations, Republicans and Democrats, have all conveyed the same message, that we need fairer burden sharing in this alliance. I tell the Europeans that, and they agree, that we need to invest more in defense, not to please the United States, but because it is in our security interest to invest more. Because we face a more dangerous world with a more brutal form of terrorism, Daesh, ISIL. We have seen that in Iraq, Syria, and other places, with a more assertive Russia, the consequence of the rise of China, cyber, hybrid threats, all of that together led to the decision in 2014 to increase defense spending. And the total added spending across Europe and Canada is $190 billion extra, and that is significant, and that's something that really makes a difference. We still need to do more. We need to maintain the momentum, but I think it is good to see that allies are making good on their pledge, on the commitment that they made back in 2014. On COVID, NATO's main task is to make sure that the health crisis, the pandemic, doesn't become a security crisis. And therefore we have been focused on the importance of upholding our missions, deterrence and defense, and we have been able to do that. There are some adjustments in some of the exercises, but the main message is that the battle groups, the readiness of our forces, air policing, all the other stuff we do every day has been maintained, so we are able to prevent the health crisis from becoming a security crisis. What we also have seen is that NATO and the military across the alliance have provided valuable support to the civilian efforts to cope with the pandemic. We have seen how military, supported also by NATO, have helped to transport critical equipment, medical personnel, setting up field hospitals, now assisting also with vaccination in many countries. And NATO has provided support to different allied countries. So the military has provided support to the civilian efforts in coping with the pandemic. Thirdly, you asked about Turkey. Turkey is an important ally. You can just look at the map and you see that Turkey is the ally bordering Iraq and Syria. Infrastructure, airports, bases in Turkey has been very important in our campaign against Daesh, ISIS, liberating the territory Daesh, ISIS controlled not so long ago. Turkey is also the NATO ally that has suffered the highest number of terrorist attacks, and Turkey hosts millions of refugees. So Turkey is an important ally. At the same time, there is no reason to hide that there also are differences and disagreements. And then I think NATO is a platform for allies to raise those differences and disagreements. I also expressed my concerns, for instance, on the consequences of the procurement of the S-400. We have seen disagreements, differences related to the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. But again, I think that NATO's role is to try to find positive approaches. We have been able to establish what we call a deconfliction mechanism, bringing the military experts from Turkey and Greece together here at NATO and agreed mechanisms to reduce the risk for incidents and accidents between Turkish and Greek military planes or ships capabilities in the Eastern Mediterranean. And this also helped to pave the way for negotiations or exploratory talks between Turkey and Greece on the underlying issues. Let me also add that NATO has helped to implement the agreement between Turkey and EU on the refugee migration crisis in the Eastern Med. We have a deployment of NATO ships there, which brings together Turkey and Greece, Frontex, in dealing with a very difficult situation there. So yes, there are problems, but NATO provides a platform to look for positive approaches and ways to address some of those problems.
We now have time for one last question, and that will go to Radu Tudor from Antena 3 Romania.
Thank you, Oana Lungescu. Secretary General, you've mentioned 2 days ago that today we'll discuss some decisions to reinforce measures on the eastern flank. General Ben Hodges from CEPA said in a study that the US administration needs to have a strategy on the Black Sea and that NATO must reinforce its measures on the eastern flanks in the Black Sea. I kindly remind you that in the last 15 years, all the military aggressions from Russia were in the Black Sea, to Georgia, to Ukraine, to Crimea. And please, could you detail a bit what kind of measures NATO has in mind to enforce the Black Sea area and the eastern flank? Thank you.
So over the last years, we have significantly increased our military presence in the eastern part of the alliance with the tailored forward presence, as we call it, in Romania, with the training brigade in Craiova, and then with the battle groups in the Baltic region and in the Baltic countries and in Poland, more air policing and also more naval presence with different NATO allied ships and the standing NATO maritime forces. Just over the last months, we have seen, I think it's 3 actually, US naval ships in the Black Sea, and we have seen other allied countries also operating in the Black Sea. Then we have 3 littoral states, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria. And we have 2 very close partners, Ukraine and Georgia. So, and then allies are investing more. We also now have the new alliance ground surveillance, the drones that can also operate along our borders, especially in the east and in the south. That also improves our situational awareness, our ability to do reconnaissance and intelligence along our borders. One of the reasons why I have put forward a proposal that we should have more NATO funding for deterrence and defense is that I believe that by paying more of that together, we will incentivize more allies to provide capabilities also to the presence, or especially to the presence in the eastern part of the alliance, including in the Black Sea and the Baltic region.
Thank you very much. This concludes this press conference. We'll see you again tomorrow evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.